Welcome back to Krown's Crypto Cave as we get ready for a crack of dawn-ish type early morning from Helsinki, Finland today. I'm getting started nice and early because it's a new week of opportunity and there's plenty to talk about with world markets opening up for futures tradings in the early morning hours, of course, and then more importantly, Bitcoin and all cryptos closing for the weekly yesterday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So want to follow up on all of that. We didn't really talk too much about the short and medium term yesterday because nothing really actually changed there. It was actually more focused on the long term. So that's going to be a big focus of today, obviously. And other than that, I would like to wish you the best and the happiest because it's a nice little start to a new week. And new weeks are, well, sometimes they can be new weeks of shit. Sometimes they can be new weeks of piss. Sometimes they can be new weeks of just normality. And sometimes they can even be actually good. Anyways, looking at the open interest over here, we do see it is still hanging around that 2.5 billion marker, which I do want to keep an eye on because if Bitcoin does break the high term time frame range, that would be that same area that we spoke about above 11,900, which actually we might have done yesterday night, perhaps, or broken the downside of the range on the long term as well, which we could actually probably move up in line with yesterday's analysis on that higher low being printed at about 11,400. We want to see a move outside of this range above 2.5 billion to kind of confirm the efficacy of that move. Alongside, we want to see both volume, volatility, and open interest rising with price action or rising up while price action comes down to kind of confirm a continuation-ish type scenario. So with that said, we still are kind of waiting for this. What's more important actually right now, and funnily enough, like this is something that I usually don't really put all that much weight on, but Bitcoin dominance coming down another 0.5%. So altcoins are having an absolute phenomenal party during this time. Again, gaining more against Bitcoin on the Satoshi ratios, while Bitcoin essentially holds the range, between this $11,000, $12,000 region, and altcoins are allowed to do whatever the fuck that they want to do during that time. And I imagine though, however, looking at yesterday's analysis on the Bitcoin dominance chart for the long term, we were looking for another leg down, maybe another percent or so, but after that I actually would be looking for a big bad bounce, of which time I would imagine that probably coincides with Bitcoin actually fully and formally taking a leap above or below this next high term time frame range. So with that said, it's still while I do think that this probably has some more to go, I would be looking for a pullback on most alts versus Satoshis, especially if Bitcoin gets going here. Fear and greed index also ticking up 1 point as well from yesterday to today, even though Bitcoin was more or less sideways. And actually, I think it was pretty much more or less sideways, maybe up a few points from close to close. Looking at the data tab right here, I'm curious if we see anything of interest right now too. And yes, okay, so the global funding rate is actually headed up quite a bit there. Still not anything of particular interest, but it is trending up here. As you can see, it's hanging above 0.05%. It's really not until this becomes like 2 or 3 times that number where it becomes an actual indication or something that's been trusted in the past to provide indication of major pivots on the market. But still, we actually do see a change of behavior here. As you can see for the months prior, we were mostly just hanging in the 0.1 to or negative 0.01, just in a small range right there. And the fear and greed index also making is this new highs on this run? I do believe, nope, we're actually not at new highs, but just 1 point below. So with that in mind, let's actually go into the actual price action charts right here. Let's start off with the weekly as well. And there is a bunch of things that I really want to nail in on the weekly right here before we get going, because this is really where all the fun is being had right now. It's not to say that the lower term timeframes don't matter. It's just right now I want to have that perspective of what's going on in the higher term timeframes. And first and foremost, and most importantly, we do see that Bitcoin has officially taking a leg up. Where's my chart? There it is, taking a leg up into the blue box territory, the same blue box territory that Bitcoin has been getting rejected from for the last 3 years. So this would suggest that we are looking at a change of behavior here from a long period of time. And more importantly, with the advent of last night, we've been looking at a multi-pronged way of kind of judging, historically speaking, what Bitcoin's major runs have been spurned upon. And one of the big keys that we were looking for, if I can find my chart right here, yes, there it is the weekly Challenger bands. And looking at the weekly Challenger bands right here, Bitcoin did actually officially close above the top side Challenger band last week. Yesterday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Actually, funnily enough, did we do it last week as well? Hey, we did actually do it last week on Stamp. We don't see this on other exchanges, though, funnily enough. But now I believe all major exchanges getting that closure above, that critical closure above 11,914 and 2 cents closing price. Topside Challenger band closed at 11,883.18. And I just want to make sure that all exchanges agree here. BitMexico agrees. Yes, it does agree. Does GDAX agree? GDAX does agree. We already looked at that stamp. What about Finex? Finex is also in agreement as well. So all major exchanges have closed above that area, and that has been, historically speaking, a nice way to kind of judge the beginning, or maybe not beginning, but a continuation phase of typically a long-term reversal. So the last example that we have was back on over here, and there's two things to be aware of when looking at this particular indicator. We want to be both looking at price actions interplay between where it is in relationship to the top side or bottom side Bollinger Band, and then also the slope of the 20 simple moving average right here. Obviously, when the 20 simple moving average is having a positive slope plus price action above the top side Bollinger Band, well, that's when you typically get price action like this. In fact, Bitcoin just got that first pop out of that $3,100 base in early 2019, and then boom, massive move up for a 169% gainer. Great number right there. You'll probably say, but Krown, what about this one right here? Bitcoin did close above the top side Bollinger Band. No, it actually didn't. Well, it actually did, but the slope of the 20 simple at that time was actually negative, maybe even neutral, but mostly negative. As of right now, we actually do see that same sort of interplay where Bitcoin's closing above, and more importantly, we do retain a positive slope. And if we go back in the history of time, we can test this all the way back, going to, well, essentially the genesis, which I'll pull out a longer term chart here. But all of the runs from the 2015 to 2018 run were pretty much spurned upon by closing the top side Bollinger Band, or above it, I should say. Granted, the 20 simple had a positive slope, which it did pretty much the whole way through, and then Bitcoin would actually reaccumulate on the 20 simple for all these bullish dumps during that time as well. But getting all these moves within here, getting this one right here, this one right here, this one right here, right here, right here, right here, right here, and right here. And we can go back to the genesis as well, all the way to 2013, 2014, and even 2012, and find these same sort of interplays with price action. So I do put quite a bit of weight on that, and that was very important to see officially confirmed last night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And what this can also play into, as we've been looking at over here, is we can add a few other things onto that, which actually, are more fast-acting derivatives on price action, which essentially did tell you sooner. And what do we have to look at right here? Well, first and foremost, weekly Stokes also getting back into the critical zone. And anytime we've seen the weekly Stokes get into the critical zone, well, it pretty much builds out of that same base. But telling you a little bit before, because this one is, well, it's going to lie more, but it's going to tell you faster. Is kind of a bad way of explaining that. But what do I mean? Well, basically, anytime that the weekly Stokes have gotten into this critical zone, well, let's just see what happens. April 2019, what happened right around here? That was actually this girthy green dildo party getting started from essentially that same point that we just measured out when looking at the Bollinger Bands right there. Another 155% from signal given to next major high. Going back a little bit further than that, let's actually pull out a longer term chart. There we go. We can look at all these runs in 2015 to 2018, and you'll notice that a lot of them were caught by getting into the bullish control zone right here. You see this one, getting this one right here, getting this one right here. Yeah, telling you all about that move. And it doesn't look all that impressive on log scale, but that is a 73.5% move, by the way. Getting this one right here out of that base, I think that's another like 50% move, by the way. It doesn't look like all that much. Yeah, 44%. Then getting this one right here, quite nice one it looks like at 131%. And then a few more along the way right here, 71, and then of course this big one from like 6,000 to 20,000. And we can again go all the way back to the genesis and about the same thing, getting this base over here, this run over here, this run over here, all from the breakout points, telling you the soonest in comparison to the other indicators that we've been looking at. And I'm not saying that this is, I'm not saying that the interpretation is going to be that Bitcoin's going to play out one-to-one those exact sort of same percentage moves. As you can see, there's great variation between them, but we can probably come up with a range of like, worst case scenario, best case scenario, something like that to be going off of, and just play around with numbers. Not something that I'd necessarily put a shit ton of weight on. At the end of the day, trend is probably more important to me than anything else. And well, if things do turn around, I'd be happy to turn around with it. But looking at weekly RSI, we have a similar interplay over here as well. Anytime that the weekly RSI has got into the bullish control zone, which funnily enough we kind of are right now, but we've seen those same sort of runs being called upon. So going back to April 2019, that was again this base right here, calling that one. So that is also in unison with all of the other indicators that we've looked at. Then we have obviously all of these runs in the 2015 to 2018 run right here, right here, right here, right here, right here, and right here. And actually the first one right here telling you very, 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 very soon actually. Then obviously this run in 2013, another run in 2013, 2012 run back on over here, all getting, very, 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 very phenomenal moves like that. So where could Bitcoin go from here? Well, Granted all that, we could play around with numbers, and I want to be on the record. I want to be on the record. No, I want to say first, before I do this, this is not to say that this is going to happen. This is not saying anything. This is more so for spoon boys looking for dumb shit targets that I don't really give a fuck about. And as a trader, this is not even trading. This is just moon boy fucking crystal ball type bullshit. This is the spoon boy fucking epitome. Except, well, the spoon boy epitome is $1,000 to make $1 million in just 5 years. Like, what the fuck? If we were to add like maybe 40% to price action, where that put Bitcoin? Well, it is interesting that it actually does line up with that $16,000 high right here. That naturally will be a pivot on the market if and when Bitcoin does approach that area. I'm not saying that it will, but if it did, that would be a very likely area for a pullback. Anyways, so it does kind of make sense that it would be within that region. And of course, we've seen on the higher end a lot more than that. Just out of curiosity, what would it look like around the $20,000 high? That would be about 60%, and that kind of was within the range that we saw for the most part, with a few outliers here and there printing like crazy numbers in the. There's actually a few examples with like 1,000+ percentage gains. And more than a few above 100, but in a more muted response right there, it actually does look quite interesting. And this is further mediated by looking at our very high time frames for Bitcoin, specifically the monthly, as the monthly is continuation here. The monthly did close on new highs compared to our June 2019 highs right here. In fact, it was the second closing high that we've ever seen in Bitcoin's history on the monthly, and more importantly, that confirms this is a continuation of trend, as we have a low, high, higher low, and well, seeing as we took out the prior high, has to be another higher high, depending upon where we put it in. But overall, the momentum oscillators would agree with this one as well. Looking at monthly Stoics pointing nice and erect to the upside, looking good, and monthly RSI actually putting in a little bit of a head and shoulder, inverted head and shoulders right here. Not super obvious, but very likely does insinuate another test into the bullish control zone. Funnily enough, the bullish control zone would require a price of about 13,000 to reach it. On the next closure, that is, which is coming in about 2 weeks. And we do see that monthly jewel giving you a little bit of a hot or long signal. Don't really trust that one all that much because not enough information. But if we do go to the weekly over here, we can see that these have gotten more bifurcated from each other. So it is suggesting that this signal is still playing out, still within the context of hodl I consider this a hot or long signal. For the more aggressive traders, they'll actually look at this as a long signal regardless, coming in from I guess this base right here, out of 9,400. So realistically, in practice, obviously that is rather tradable. So credit to all the people who did take that one, because that was that was more than a $2,000 move from top to bottom right now, and looking like potentially more to go. So as it stands right now, that's my perspective on the higher term timeframes, and we can take that again one more step further if we go back. Do we want to go back here? Yeah, we might as well go back here. The blue box territory that we've been looking at, that Bitcoin's been getting rejected in for the last 3 years since January 2018, we have closed 2 successful dildos on new highs above that region. And this last one, I would say significantly new highs of $500, almost $500 higher than what we saw in these regions right here at about 11,500, with our last one closing out at 11,900, a little bit over 11,900 actually. So most importantly with this, it would suggest that we do have a macro change of behavior, as what it looks like here is that, we do see institutional order flow dynamics at play, with Bitcoin price action falling away from this area multiple times over the past few years, but extremely aggressively is the key component of that. So to get back above that would imply that something new is going on. Also taking out the 0.5 fib along the way, and if we look at the volume profile, it would suggest that we do have a little bit of a change of behavior here as well, getting above that last kind of high value node. Now this is obviously not a high value node in the absolute sense, but in a relative sense, because after this area right here, it's, anything above really 12,000 is just it's a whole new dynamic. Things are going to get much more volatile than what you see right now. We can also look at it from a major moving average perspective, of which it actually. I actually really do like this read right here. Anytime that I see lower periods all trade above higher periods, all with positive slopes, it's generally going to be good for the long term. But if we go back in time and kind of, relate this, we do see a similar setup right here, albeit not as good as this. You want them kind of more close to each other. And then we saw the same interplay the whole way through from 2015 to 2018 on this run, where the 10 symbol gets above the 21, all above the 55, and they all kind of stay in a nice splayed out bullish attempt. And then same thing going all the way back to the Genesis. Again, not really as much price action history to make too much out of it, but it is there nonetheless. And I suppose worth mentioning in passing On top of that, we should also mention this. So Bitcoin also has a very historic way of kind of how it plays out these runs to begin with. If you remember back on over here in early 2019, when Bitcoin played out that whole move down to 3,100, what happened for the next 3 months? Well, for the next 3 months, Bitcoin put in an ascending triangle on the lows, breaks it out to the upside, gets continuation the whole way through. And that's when we started to initiate all of those oscillator signals right here. Well, very similar to what we did right here. An ascending triangle, and this one on the highs, obviously a little bit different, or it's more of a continuation play, but still a bullish reaccumulation formation at the end of the day. And continuation was the name of the game, just like it was over here. And these were extremes in the way that Bitcoin kind of plays out those 3-month-long consolidations. Usually does denote its major continuation or reversal drives. We've seen it come both ways. This one over here was a 3-month consolidation on the lows, which led to continuation to the downside, obviously. But Bitcoin does have a nice history of playing this, and it also could be found out on the daily historical volatility percentile. Anytime that we see trending down action for like 3 months at a time, of which we saw right here in 2019, and of which we saw more recently over here in 2020, those typically are the big bases being built. And for whatever reason, it happens to typically be over about 3 months. I imagine that over time that will naturally become more and more long. Anyways, so let's go now into the lower term timeframes now that we've spoken our fucking heads off about the higher term timeframes. And still, while we actually did kind of meet what I was looking for on the 12-hour and daily to denote continuation here to the upside, like an upside breakout, Bitcoin coming back down to test around last 12-hour backfill at like 11,775. Nice scalp there in the early morning hours, it looks like, but more importantly, we haven't really seen continuation just yet. So let's check out the momentum oscillators here and see what would denote a failure, like an actual failure. And also, are there any big problems about this potentially coming about as well? And first things first, yes, there is. If Bitcoin does fail to get continuation probably within these next couple days, we very likely will initiate a 12-hour sell signal, and it'll be a pretty good one. It won't be a super perfect, because I want to see this one have a negative slope too, but it would be pretty damn good and definitely worth paying attention to, at least for my own trading behaviors. So for right now, it is kind of like a ticking time bomb. It's kind of almost in a do or die situation. Don't necessarily like putting those words on it, but looking at price action on the very low time frames, it actually looks kind of droopy. It actually looks like it wants to test back down towards 11.6, 11.5 region, retest the last kind of higher low being put in perhaps. But here's the thing. Now that Bitcoin really has confirmed that last higher low, about, I don't know, half a week ago now at 11,400. As long as we're above 11,400, you can still make the interpretation that the trend is the upside on the daily, and that the daily is still more or less bullish, which leads on into the higher term timeframes. Yes, but the second that this gets taken out and closed below on a 12-hour or daily below 11,400, which is also pretty much around the 21x benchmark average right now as well, then that's your first big warning sign, and that would be a big enough warning sign for me to want to want to step back and not really do anything. Below 11,000, I do believe that we'll see a pretty big washout to the downside, very likely all the way back down below 10,000 to about 98 to 9,900 region, and retest this region, which was actually one of the gaps on CMEs as of more recent times. So it is going to be relevant going forward. It's just at what point is it relevant? Like at what time point is it relevant? That can obviously take months and in some cases years from what we've seen. But looking at this right here, whoops, wrong chart. Let's go back to this one right here. Yeah, looking at this one right here, as long as we're above that area, the daily still is technically fine from a trading perspective. Same with the 12-hour. But here's the thing: because we can look at momentum oscillators for this, we can come up with kind of like a narrative of what needs to be done in order to maintain that posturing right now. And as you can see on the daily momentum actually remains to the upside as long as we're above 11,650. That's very interesting as an area, because that would be the same area or around the same area actually as this rising trend line if you are looking at this as an ascending triangle, which is a bullish reaccumulation formation. And yeah, actually in the low $11,600 region and rising. So it would suggest that we could test back down to the bottom side of this triangle and still remain in upside momentum. But any closes below there, and now you start to have some problems from the lower term time frames. So the way that I layer this is that any sort of a 2-hour or 4-hour closure below 11,600, that's your first big warning flag. Any sort of a 12-hour or daily closure below 11,400, big warning flag, and I would argue that would be probably enough. And anywhere below 11,000, I don't think that there's any more excuses to be made on Bitcoin price action. So for right now, things still look more or less fine. Bitcoin is above all major moving averages. All major moving averages look good here, and we do see that daily Stokes, like we just said, are popping back up. More importantly, also following this trend line that we've seen since what is this, early July, getting this base right here, getting this base more recently right here, and then Bitcoin's kind of like last of the last in this current range. So interesting stuff nonetheless, but still needs to start, does imply that if the boo laws are going to take control, they should start taking control sooner rather than later. Otherwise, gravity will take over. 12-hour is more or less the same from a major moving average perspective, and from a momentum perspective, actually a lot more abrupt, or a lot more recent, or a lot more demanding right now. What do I mean by that? Well, if Bitcoin does close this next 12-hour dildo below 11,720, then momentum will turn back onto the downside. Currently it is up, but you'll notice that would also be kind of destroying our last little structure right here. If you're looking at like the very low time frames, I'm guessing, and that can have the kind of like domino effects of turning everything down after that. Still, I'd be going level by level, but that would be a good way of kind of like condensing these regions and coming up with areas to be aware of. We'll call it, areas to be aware of. that's what we'll say. And then also historical volatility percentile on this time frame as well is coming down incredibly aggressively, and I think we're actually in the single digits right now. No, we're not in the single digits, but we're very close. We're actually at an 11 read, and anytime that this thing comes down really hard, usually it does set up for a big bad move. We're talking about December 2019. We're talking about more recently in July. We're talking about, historically speaking, all these major moves. Jesus Christ, September 2019 as well. That was that move down from like 10.3 to 6 or something. So overall, things are under pressure right here, and it's up to the boo laws to show their boo law. To show their boola, and I'm going to take this off right there and take these off. And now let's go down to the very low time frames and see what Bitcoin's looking like here. On the 4-hour, it does look droopy. It does not look strong here on the 4-hour, I will say. But there is a counterpoint to that. Well, obviously the higher term timeframes matter a lot more. And for the 4-hour timeframes, it actually looks a little bit more like a bullish reset, perhaps from an oscillator perspective. 4-hour Stokes coming down the whole way through, while Bitcoin price action is quite literally sideways here in a very tight range between 11,750 and 11,900-ish region. So what would it take to actually turn that back to the upside? Well, any sort of a 4-hour closure above 11,910. That is where we put in the last local high on the 4-hour. So it would essentially insinuate that continuation above that level likely does lead into the next move towards the mid 12,000s region. 4-hour RSI is inconsequential, a little bit geared towards the downside here. But mostly neutral there. Looking at a 3-hour, do we see anything of note here? The 3-hour is actually under price action right now, so 3-hour momentum will remain to the upside as long as Bitcoin price action is above 11,800 about, and we can see that it's actually defending against the bearish controls, and at the same time, that would be good. We do see a nice curtailing event of historical volatility percentile from this time frames region as well. However, still has a little bit more to go, so we can very easily be caught in this range for another, we're on the 17th. Okay, actually, it would imply maybe around today, maybe later today or tomorrow, maybe around the time that traditional markets open up, if I had to pester a gander on that one. Looking at the 2-hour, momentum remains the upside as long as Bitcoin's closing above 11,820. And we also have a dual sell signal kind of lining up there too. So it's a ticking time bomb here. Boo laws do need to take control sooner rather than later. And looking at an hourly, what do we have here? Very nice curtailing event on historical volatility percentile. This one again would imply resolution actually today or tomorrow. Statistically speaking, it would be very likely. And then looking at momentum oscillators, we will cross the downside we will remain to the downside as far as momentum goes on the hourly, which not all that big of a deal as long as we're below 11,930. So again, riding that structure on the last kind of local high that we see right at that same level. So everything is lining up here, but I'm curious how world markets are going to be looking coming into this week, and how that's going to play into the analysis right here. So for what it's worth, can Bitcoin have another test back down here? Yeah, could very easily do that intraday. But as long as Bitcoin's above 11,600, I actually do believe that Bitcoin will still be working its way up towards 12,500 based off of the measure move off this ascending triangle right here, which is pointed towards also not just the measure move, but also of course historically relevant regions coming in from June and July 2019. So I would be looking for a small pullback from 12,500-ish region, give or take a few bucks there, and then probably sets it up for a continuation drive a little bit higher. At which point I would be looking for a greater pullback overall in the crypto markets and probably play out some very frustrating sideways action and then perhaps some down as well. But for right now, I'll just be aware of these levels. So let's go check out what NASDAQ futures are doing in the early morning. Looks like they're up. Ooh, nice up and early, and looks to me like we will be reapproaching and testing the last prior high. I mean, we already kind of did that last week on Thursday. Looking at the weekly right here, weekly is very interesting, right? So the weekly is very interesting because it actually has a very, I don't want to say simple, but simplistic way, we'll call it, of trading this one. And what do I mean by that? Well, because it did close a little bit of a hangman dildo at the end of last week, or Jesus Christ dildo, whatever the fuck you want to call it, we can kind of use this as a judgment of reversal or continuation, taking out the top side of this, or especially the week prior on August 3rd closure at 11,000, or sorry, on the high at 11,283 and a quarter. Then I'd still be looking for it to kind of just glide its way up to the fib extension target at about 11,400, which also was in line, by the way, with the probability panel that we saw, I believe, on Saturday. I showed that one for the extension showing I think it was a second state deviation in that region. We could probably look at it again today, but I want to finish this point. And then also, if we take out last week's low, I would be looking for a greater return overall back down to about 10.5 region. So right now, it does look like it wants to get picked up on the very low term timeframes. It does look constructive and does look like it has a bullish bias here. And if I had to call it, yeah, I do think that it does head up towards 11,400-ish region and maybe even beyond. Looking at E-mini futures for SPY, what do we see here? It looks a little more toppy than NASDAQ futures on the very low term timeframes, but on the daily, very, very simple way to be trading this one as well. We can move up the last kind of point of failure, essentially in line with the 10 simple in this last little structure right here. As long as it's above there, yes, the path of least resistance is basically towards the prior high officially. But personally speaking, this thing looks like it wants to make new all-time highs. Again, perspective of the higher term timeframes is a thing of glory, and this thing is quite literally in an uptrend from a monthly and hasn't stopped being in an uptrend from a monthly ever since literally 2009. So so there you go. There you fucking go. But overall, continuation still here is the name of the game. And yes, it would look like new all-time highs are probably incoming. The only way, or not the only way, but a good warning flag for this one would be any sort of a daily closure below 3,350, and I'd be looking for a return back down here towards 3,300. I'm sure that we have potential bearish divergence in play on the daily. Yeah, it would initiate that if that were to happen. But for right now, I actually do think the up here, unless if this area is violated to the downside, particularly on a daily closure. If that were to happen, yes, I would be looking for a return back down to 3,300, and then we'll reanalysize it after that. Potentially could be reversal from that area, but for right now, continuation to the upside looks more likely. And do we have anything to be aware of here on the weekly? Yeah, the weekly also has a very simplistic way of trading this one as well. Closed a doji dildo last week. If we take out the high side of it, I'm looking for a continuation to new all-time highs. If we take out the low side of it, I'm basically looking for a return back down to 10.5 or 10.5. No, I'm thinking of NASDAQ now. The numbers are all stuck in my head, but 3,300 and then probably more over time. But this looks like it's going to have another leg and then probably play off a long consolidation, maybe reversal on top of that. We'll see what happens. But for right now, probably another leg. Let's go check out, everyone asks about fucking Nifty 50. Kind of funny, but fair enough. I understand there's a lot of Indians watching this, so let's see what it's got. Just got a golden cross right here on the daily. Does look a little bit, it's certainly in comparison to other world markets, not strong. But as the saying goes, a rising tide does lift all ships. So if U.S. markets do continue to the upside here, I'd be looking for something like this to continue up as well. Probably up to the next level, somewhere around like 11,625, something like this, somewhere around right there in this little boxy territory. It looks like we can map out this little liquid zone. I'd be looking for a stutter step right here if it does kind of melt up. And by the same token, the downside's a lot easier for something like this. Let me get rid of this fucking wedge. Jesus Christ, man. When will the wedges just stop? It's my absolute least favorite thing to look at ever. And probably was fucking around when I even charted that one. But looking at the weekly right here, as you know, as long as weeklies are closing above 11,000, yes, it's very, 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 very likely to head up towards this target and probably beyond in line with world markets. However, if 11,000 and it's 11th, yeah, it's about 11,000 even, does get broken to the downside, I would look for a return all the way back down to 10.6 to 10.5 region, and then I'd want to reassess, as this would really start to look like a major, well, it looked like a major continuation of the downtrend on the on the weekly. So for right now, yes, I'd be cautiously bullish, but does need to be taken with special consideration and special care. Anyways, let's go check out what's Japan doing this morning. Japan open before anyone else and looking like it's going to get another try to the upside, probably 23,700. So world market's still looking like they want a little bit more here. Other than that, do we have anything of interest? Yeah, let's go look at euro dollar. Euro dollar is going to once again approach 119, as we said. I would still be looking for 119 to 119 and a half to push back. If this next weekly does close above 119 and a half, or whatever, what is it exactly, 119,730, then this is going to be a continuation overall, and I'd be looking for a big leg up into like the 120, like what is this, like 123? Yeah, 123 to 1.25 region actually. But for right now, I'd still stick with what I've been saying. I do think that we test up a little bit more, but I do think that this likely turns into a major rejection in line with Dixie probably putting in a major base somewhere around the 200 exponential moving average here on the monthly. I would be massively bullish on this, over the long period of time, meaning like 5 to 10 years down the road, not this year, not next year. But if maybe Dixie has another leg down here officially to like 91.25, I don't have a strong opinion on that. I do have a strong opinion on this area, very likely providing at the very least a nice bounce and potential reversal. So that would imply that euro dollar will turn down on that pivot, around that same pivot as well, as they are going to be in relationship to each other. What else do we want to check out? Maybe Aussie dollar shitcoin. What is this one doing? Probably puts in a major high around the 55. I mean, it's just been the trend for the last like 6 years. It's been a 7-year running trend. I think it's going to change now. This time's different, baby. Yeah, probably does put in a monthly high here, but on the short-term time frames, does that mean we grind this area out a little bit? Probably yes. What else do we want to look at? Let's look at Link. What's that Link doing, man? Did it make new all-time highs again? What in the fuck? This thing does look like it wants to actually go for another all-time high. Hold on, this is not the chart that I want to be looking at. This is not the chart that you're looking for. This is the one that I'm looking for. It's hard not to look for something like this as overall continuation on the weekly. Now, with that said, do I think that a test back down to like 16.25 can happen? Yeah, absolutely. I do think so, but I'd be looking for new all-time highs this week with the potential test back down to 16.25, but I'll be looking at that as a potential opportunity mediated by, we'll just put this guy up right there. Actually, that's even at 14. That's like 14.75. Holy shit. That's much for the, this one's getting really crazy. This is actually like pretty fucking impressive right here. Oh my God, man. I mean, technically from a weekly, there's, I don't want to say it. Yeah, I don't want to say it, but we'll look at probabilities just to come up with the next major areas. That's wild. I do think that a test back down to like 16.5 is not out of the question though. But let's see where the next resistances could be to the upside. First standard deviation showing about $20 again, but that's just continuation at that point. Second standard deviation showing just under 21. Third standard deviation showing 22. Somewhere around there. One of those two, either 21 or 22 is what I'd be looking for. I do not feel in any way, shape, or form comfortable ever calling a high on a parabolic rally like this. At the very least, I'd need to see bearish divergence on a daily. And the funny thing about this is that there's no bearish divergence here as it is right now. Doesn't mean that it can't come up, and it will very likely come up because, well, we've gotten to pretty extreme levels here, but until we actually have that in place, which would imply more highs first, I wouldn't even be looking for, like a greater pullback, just short-term timeframes. And maybe we do have that, present on like a 4 hour. Yes, we definitely do have it on present on a 4 hour, and 4 hour Jewel is giving a sell signal as well. So is this thing likely to pull back down maybe to like 16.5, maybe even further down to like 15.5? Yeah, I do think so. But overall, I think it gets another try to the upside regardless of that fact. So short-term, medium term, maybe back down to test around those regions. Long-term on the weekly, it's still fine, technically speaking. Okay, what else do we want to look at? Do we want to look at ripples? Did Ripple actually change its trend around here? I think it's been having so many chances over the last few weeks. Holy shit! Golden cross on the weekly here, not bad. And yes, it actually has taken out the last high officially. So for the first time since, holy shit! Oh, this is gonna be my clickbait title for sure. It's gonna get all the fucking the Ripple spoon boys in this bitch. My spoons bring all the boys to the yard. No, it just brings all the ripples to the yard, and whatever the fuck that entails. I need to sip this water, man. I'm fucking thirsty right now. There we go. All right, nice one. Okay, so this one's been in a weekly downtrend ever since December 2017, and for the first time since December 2017, it's actually gone into an uptrend. This was your last high. This was your second to last low, higher low. We just closed on new highs. Just got a golden cross at the same time. I'd be looking for this one to test into like 34 cents, 35 cents region and continue upwards and onwards. Next area of interest is going to be somewhere around here, upper 30 cents region. And well, no, I don't want to supersede the 200 simple right there before we even get there. Somewhere around here though is where I'd be looking towards, and then we'll come back to it after that. But overall, you do have your first major potential reversal going on here. Well, I mean, technically is a reversal. Weekly RSI is a little bit strange looking. I really don't trust this chart like at all. I really don't fucking trust it, but hey, it is in the cards there. Looking at Stellar, it's like it's more beautiful brother, as apparently it kind of made that move a little bit earlier. We do see that it does have a golden cross pretty much at the same time, closing on new highs as well. Right at the 200 simple, but does look like it's ready for another leg up towards about 13 cents region, at which point I would be looking for another little pulley pullback somewhere in that region. But overall, is this one in the process of reverting its very long-term down market? Looks like it, yes. So it looks like, a rising tide once again will be lifting all ships, and even the shittiest of shit will be allowed to rally if it really wants to. What about Monero? Is Monero doing anything of particular interest? Close on new highs as well. A little bit of an anemic close right here. It is a little bit problematic. Does suggest that we actually could test all the way back down to like $77 if we take out last week's low, but that's a humongous range. I don't really trust that all that much either, or at least as a trader, that's just not very helpful, right? Looking at it daily, consolidated at a high level, yes. I don't really have much to, I really don't have much to add onto it other than that. Do I think that it can test downwards? Yeah, I do think that it will test a little bit downwards here on the short term, medium term. Long term though, just close on new highs, probably to get some continuation overall. That would be the more likely thing, of course, as trends do tend to continue. Okay, what else we want to look at? This video is already 37 minutes long. It's too long, man, too fucking long. So let's go on over here. Let's look at some probabilities. Or first, let's go back to Bitcoin's short term areas. And on the 4 hour, I'd still have to be looking for a closure above 1250 or a wick above this prior high right here at about 12110. But as I've been saying, have been saying recently that a 12 hour or daily total closure above 11.9 probably gets this next move to 12.5, 12.6 region. And we did get that last night. So I would actually be looking for that to happen, especially as long as Bitcoin is closing 4 hour dildos above about 11,770-ish region. Now that we're not in the spoon boy territory, we can actually speak to each other like normal fucking people, which is good. And so what we can do with this is that, yeah, actually, it would appear that would still be the area of interest. And to the downside, obviously 11,000 is not as important. Well, it is. It's actually more important. But what we could still use is 11,400, the last higher low right here, to kind of judge the downside. And we'll do that. We'll put it on, of course, stamp. and let's see what the probabilities align with. Okay, so showing 6.63% probability of hitting the upside target. All rings are having a positive slope here, I should say. And the below target probability, 8.38%. Now, 8.38% for 11,400 to get taken out on a daily delta closure. That would officially revert the trend. But what if we just wanted to destroy the ascending triangle narrative? Well, where would Bitcoin have to close below to destroy that? 11,600 now. So let's see what that would show. And then let's also just look at what 12,000 would show as well, just to get like the next sort of continuation drive there, we'll call it. And 11,600 does have a 20% probability, or a little bit over 20% probability. That could happen, definitely. Above 12,000, 41.06% probability. So still much more likely. Boulahs do have the ball in their, in their court. But as we looked at on a lot of those momentum oscillators, it would suggest that if continuation is not had sooner rather than later, we probably will play out a more long form consolidation to the downside, testing into the lower 11,000s over time. So with that said, I do think that we're actually kind of setting up for a very fun week here. But overall, if I kind of had to wrap up my thoughts here, my trigger was hit for that. Technically speaking, should I be more conservative with that, and should I have picked 12,000 instead? I actually do think that works out. So we did close on new highs. More importantly, 1, 2, 3. This one's a new high right here. So I'd still be going with that. Major warning flag being thrown below 11,600, below 11,400. We do have a reversal, and I'd be looking for another move back down to 11,000 even. I do think that things would bounce there, but after things bounce, very likely to have continuation, probably down to 10.5 and then 98 to 9900 region. But I want to see that all in real time. For right now, I do happen to think that things will just continue to float onwards and upwards here. But that will, again, my opinion on that will be massively wrong, and it's not financial advice, and I'm not a financial advisor, obviously. But I'll be massively wrong on that, especially if Bitcoin does come back down below 11,600 and close even a 4-hour dildo below there. Even on a lower term time frame, coming back down below this last little stutter step right here at about 11,750, that would probably insinuate another test of this rising trend line. But it's not until we break this rising trend line where that structure actually does fall apart. So for right now, cautiously bullish. I'd like to wish you a nice and healthy start to your new week of opportunities, and I'll be signing off with that. Take care, and until next time.